Thanks. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here at the COP in Lima and talk about our new report, the Adaptation Gap Report. This is a report which follows on from an emissions gap report we've been producing for many years. The emissions gap report was an attempt to show the difference between the mitigation pledges that parties have made to reduce their emissions and those that are required to keep the world below 2 degrees C, the long-term goal of this COP, or all COPs. In terms of the adaptation gap, it's a little harder to define. There is no clear target, and there's no clear metric for measuring progress against a target. So what the report's doing, this is the report we're releasing, is trying to lay down the framework for how we could start to go about defining what is an adaptation goal that we can agree, or the parties could agree here, either globally and or locally. What are some of the kinds of metrics we could use to measure it, be it in terms of finance, the amount of money that's available for adaptation, or technology, how technology is being shared and diffused for adaptation, or knowledge, so how we can bring research and knowledge to bear on the adaptation question.
Okay, so how do you see adaptation fitting into the climate deal that the parties are working towards in Paris next year?
That's a really hot question because it's part of the negotiations right now where there is some divisive discussion going on between the parties, some of which see the benefit of keeping the Paris Agreement tightly focused on mitigation. There's good reasons for that. It's to keep focus on the biggest part of the problem, which is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And ironically, that's the best way to decrease the adaptation challenge, because if we succeed on that, our adaptation challenge is less. At the same time, there are other parties that say, no, hold on a minute now, we're not creating this problem, we're a minuscule part of the mitigation solution, and we need to ensure that adaptation is taken really seriously and is written down as a part of the negotiations and the goal and the decisions coming out of both Lima and Paris. And so that's an argument going on right now. Either way, adaptation will win, because if we focus tightly on the mitigation question and if we make progress on it, have real binding emissions reductions, that will reduce our adaptation challenge. And on the other side of the coin, if the other sort of line of argument works, we ensure that adaptation is enshrined tightly in the agreements going forward.
I mean, we've just finished the first week of negotiations here, or coming to the end of it. It doesn't seem like much has been achieved so far. The biggest decision has been, to put the negotiating text on a screen. There doesn't seem to have been any substantive progress. How are the parties doing enough to make progress on this? I mean, both of your reports have been first the emissions gap and then the adaptation gap. Are we seeing enough progress to close that gap?
Let me start with a little parable. In Greek mythology, Zeno's paradox is a tortoise starting out with a 1 meter head start, and Achilles going to race him, the greatest hero of Greek times. And the tortoise says, Achilles, you cannot beat me in this race. And Achilles says, of course I'm going to crush you in this race. And the tortoise says, think about it this way. You're going to run, you're going to catch up with me. In that time, I will have moved a little bit. I'll be ahead of you. Then you're going to run and catch up with me again, and I will still have moved a tiny infinitesimal amount further. And so you won't be caught up with me. And we can see that on and on and on forever, and you'll never catch up with me. And Achilles says, hey, you're right. I can't win this race, and he gave up. That's not what we're doing here at the COPs. It may seem like we've been doing this a long time, like Achilles catching up with the tortoise, 20 COPs in a row now. But my belief is that we can achieve progress here. Yes, it's kind of ironic or funny to note that one of the big agreements was to put negotiating text on a screen. But it sounds bad, but that's actually was quite a difficult decision to make. Some parties saw this as a better way forward, and other parties thought it would be a distraction. It's part of the negotiations here, that kind of thing. And, we have some silly sounding decisions. But fundamentally, on the big picture, I believe that coming out of Lima and with the INDCs being developed in advance of Paris, We do have the ability to come up with some binding agreements on mitigation and plausibly adaptation as well in late 2015.